It's the kind of discovery Hollywood never expected and couldn't prepare for. The FBI, on June 21st, uncovered a secret hidden right beneath the feet of one of the most influential names in entertainment, Diddy. Tucked away in the basement of his mother's house in Mount Vernon, New York, the authorities stumbled upon something that could change the course of history. A suitcase buried beneath the floorboards wasn't the only thing that was found. Inside were tapes, memory cards, and, more disturbingly, multiple corpses. What had once been a quiet neighborhood in the early hours of the morning quickly turned into the epicenter of a scandal that would shake the entire entertainment industry to its core. The FBI's raid was no coincidence. They knew exactly what they were looking for. The question that now lingers in the air is chilling. Could this discovery be the final, buried secret of Diddy's past, the one that could unravel everything? The investigation into this horrifying discovery is just beginning, and what's uncovered next might just reveal more than we're ready to hear. The dawn raid. FBI knocks on the door. Hell, it was just before dawn, the world still asleep in the quiet neighborhood of Mount Vernon. But at 5:17 a.m. on June 21st, everything changed. An unmarked convoy of black SUVs rolled through the streets, the kind that doesn't need sirens to get attention. Without warning, the FBI descended on the home of Janice Combs, the mother of hip-hop mogul Diddy, and what they found beneath her basement floorboards would send shockwaves through every corner of the entertainment world. This wasn't some routine search. It was a meticulously planned operation based on insider information. The agents didn't waste any time. Armed with an emergency search warrant, they descended into the basement of the home, a house that had once been a symbol of Diddy's roots. Beneath the floor, in a place where no one had thought to look, lay secrets far darker than anyone could have imagined. Hours later, the air in the house thickened with an unmistakable stench, a sign that something truly horrific had been uncovered. Forensics teams quickly joined the investigation, armed with 3D cameras, ground-penetrating radar, and the determination to reveal what was hidden beneath layers of wood and concrete. And then it was uncovered. 3 bodies, wrapped tightly in plastic. They were stacked on top of one another, their decomposed remains a grim testament to a long-buried horror. The FBI had found more than just physical evidence. They had unearthed the ghosts of a past that had been silenced for too long. But it wasn't just the bodies that would send ripples of shock across the country. Alongside the corpses, agents discovered a half-burned leather notebook filled with strange symbols and cryptic notes, drawings that seemed eerily similar to those used in underground cults. And among the fragments, characters that seemed like nothing more than jumbled messes at first glance. But they weren't meaningless. These symbols hinted at something much bigger, a ritualistic connection tied to the very heart of the entertainment industry. The raid wasn't just a search for physical evidence. It was a step into a nightmare that America wasn't ready to face. The discovery was about to lead the FBI and the entire public down a rabbit hole so deep it threatened to expose a criminal network protected by fame, fortune, and a web of silence. What had been buried beneath Diddy's family home could shake Hollywood to its very foundations. And this was only the beginning.
The fallout begins. Diddy's connection. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours of the bodies being discovered, social media was flooded with hashtags. Hashtag basement bodies, hashtag Diddy cover-up, and countless threads speculating about the implications. A grainy photo of the crime scene leaked online, capturing just enough detail to fuel the fire. The shocking discovery wasn't just about buried bodies. It raised a far darker question. Was Diddy involved in something far more sinister than anyone had ever imagined? The FBI's raid was initially a financial investigation. It was supposed to be about assets, Diddy's vast empire of music, fashion, and luxury. But what the agents uncovered went beyond anything anyone could have prepared for. The connection to Diddy wasn't just a whisper, it was now undeniable. What followed was a media frenzy. Old footage of Diddy surfaced, interviews in which he'd casually mentioned the cost of success, saying, "Everything I have comes from sacrifices no one dares to speak of." That statement, once brushed off as the cryptic words of a rapper, now seemed eerily prophetic. Had Diddy been talking about something darker, something hidden from the public eye? The internet exploded with opinions. Some fans demanded justice for the victims, while others rallied behind Diddy, insisting that he was being politically targeted by enemies within the industry. But as the investigation deepened, the connections only became more disturbing. A former real estate agent revealed that the basement had been renovated in 2014, just when a young dancer named Kiara B had gone missing. Kiara B was last seen attending a private event linked to Diddy's circle. Her disappearance had been written off by police due to a lack of evidence. But now, with the body of a young woman matching her height and bone structure discovered in the basement, the FBI was reopening the investigation, and this time they weren't just looking at a missing persons case. They were investigating potential homicide, premeditated, calculated, and buried under the floorboards of a house that was meant to represent a safe haven for Diddy's family. The public outcry only grew. Rumors began to swirl. Was Diddy being manipulated by a hidden network of powerful figures, or was he at the center of it all? Was this just one tragic incident, or was it part of a much larger, deeply rooted web of organized crime in the entertainment industry? As more details came to light, a chilling new reality began to take shape. What started as an investigation into financial corruption had spiraled into something much darker, a system of power, influence, and death that had been buried beneath layers of money and fame. And the more the FBI uncovered, the more it became clear Diddy might not be the only one involved. What if this was just the tip of the iceberg? And what was buried under the basement floor wasn't just a secret. It was a terrifying truth, hidden for years, that could potentially destroy everything Diddy had worked for. The investigation had only just begun, but its implications would change the entertainment industry forever.
The hunt for the names time tried to forget. As the FBI continued to dig deeper, the scope of the investigation expanded in ways no one expected. The 3 bodies found beneath Janice Combs's basement were not just victims of a singular tragedy. They were pieces in a much larger puzzle, one that had been carefully hidden for years. The identities of the deceased were the next chilling revelation. Preliminary autopsy reports confirmed that all 3 victims had attended events linked to Diddy's entertainment network. The FBI now had to piece together the long-forgotten names of those who had disappeared from the public eye, their fates long shrouded in mystery. One of the victims was identified as Samantha Lee, a freelance model who appeared in a 2010 Bad Boy Records music video. Samantha had vanished after attending a private event at a mansion in the Hamptons, but her case was quickly closed. The police had no leads and no sign of foul play, brushing off the disappearance as just another case of a missing person with no evidence to support foul play. But now, the discovery of her body beneath the basement floor forced the FBI to reopen the case with a much more serious focus: homicide. The other 2 bodies were harder to identify. One was believed to be male, with a fractured jawbone matching an unsolved case involving a street dancer who had been assaulted after attempting to leave one of Diddy's infamous private parties. The dancer's medical records had gone missing, and the case had been buried under ambiguous circumstances.
But now, with a body that matched the description and the connections to Diddy's events, the investigation was no longer just about the past. It was about a pattern. The more the FBI uncovered, the clearer it became. Young, vulnerable individuals with connections to Diddy's world were disappearing, one by one, without a trace. Witnesses began to emerge, some from Diddy's own team, recalling disturbing details from secretive parties held during the height of his empire. The investigation was no longer a search for isolated victims. It had become a hunt for the truth behind a series of mysterious deaths.
The heavy phone call and final pieces. Just when the investigation seemed to reach a critical point, a chilling phone call surfaced, redirecting everything. It was a brief conversation, lasting less than 4 minutes, but its impact was enough to send shockwaves through federal authorities. The call, made to Diddy's legal representative, did not feature Diddy's voice. Instead, it was a man's voice, low and urgent, whispering words that would haunt investigators for days. "We used to keep everything clean. If he talks, more people are going to the grave." The words weren't just a warning, they were a revelation. The FBI had been searching for evidence of one man's involvement, but this phone call suggested something far deeper. It wasn't just about Diddy anymore. This was a network of powerful people, each with their own dark secrets, all linked together by a complex web of silence, money, and fear. This was no longer a simple case of individual criminal acts. It was a carefully orchestrated system of protection, one designed to ensure that no truth ever saw the light of day. The discovery of the phone call led to the appointment of Reuben Tate, a senior FBI agent renowned for his work dismantling criminal networks within the entertainment industry. Tate, who had previously taken down a major money laundering operation linked to a West Coast record label, arrived in New York with a specialized team ready to take on the task of uncovering the full extent of the operation behind Diddy's empire. As the investigation unfolded, new evidence emerged pointing to a private island in the Bahamas, a place long whispered about in industry circles, but never confirmed. Satellite images revealed unusual activity at the location, unannounced jet landings at odd hours, and structures that resembled covert film studios. This isolated, heavily guarded island, linked to Diddy's former tour manager, could hold the final pieces of a network that had been concealed for years. But the more the investigation unraveled, the more questions arose. Who else was involved, and how deep did the corruption truly run? The pieces were starting to connect, but the full picture was still far from clear.
Quincy and the Curtain of Deceit. As the investigation intensified, a surprising name began to surface in connection with the dark web that had been spun around Diddy's empire. Quincy Taylor Brown, Diddy's adopted son. For years, Quincy had kept a low profile, distancing himself from the chaos surrounding his father. He rarely appeared in the media and made a concerted effort to stay out of the public eye. But with the discovery of the bodies and the mounting pressure on Diddy, Quincy's name was becoming impossible to ignore. The FBI made a startling breakthrough when they seized a BlackBerry phone that had once belonged to Quincy. Despite being thought destroyed, the device was found during a quiet search at a rented storage unit. What they uncovered on that phone would shake the foundation of the entire investigation. The device contained hundreds of encrypted messages, behind-the-scenes photos, and a series of audio recordings that suggested Quincy had more knowledge of the events surrounding the deaths than anyone had realized. Among the recordings was one of particular note, a woman's frantic screams for help, a man's voice commanding, "Lock the door," and Quincy's own breathless whisper, "This is getting way out of hand." The chilling evidence made it clear that Quincy, despite his efforts to remain in the shadows, was deeply intertwined in the chaos surrounding his father's empire. As the investigation turned its focus to Quincy, the FBI expanded their scope to include other prominent figures once closely connected to Diddy: Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres. Both women, known for their influence and their ties to Diddy, had remained conspicuously silent throughout the growing scandal. Was this silence a sign of complicity? Or were they simply protecting themselves from being dragged into a web of lies and deception? With Quincy's phone providing a treasure trove of new information, the investigation took a sharp turn. The pieces were finally beginning to come together. Only now, the questions were growing more disturbing. Was Quincy the key to everything, or had he become another pawn in a much larger game? The FBI now had to decide whether Quincy was a witness or a participant in the conspiracy that had so successfully remained hidden for years.
Corroding culture, the system of silence. As forensic teams continued their search beneath Jadis Combs' basement, the horror deepened. What was initially thought to be an isolated case of buried bodies quickly turned into something much darker. 6 skeletons were uncovered, each encased in rebar-reinforced cement, a method typically used in soundproofed rooms. Details that suggested this was no ordinary crime scene. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a carefully constructed bunker designed to keep the truth buried. The FBI's investigation took a chilling turn as they discovered that these victims had been bound with ropes, their identities obscured, and their remains meticulously hidden. One of the skeletons was found with a medical ID bracelet, bearing the name of a rehabilitation center in Brooklyn, a facility that had been embroiled in a gang abuse scandal in 2006 before it mysteriously closed down. The discovery suggested that these victims weren't just random casualties of violence. They were part of a much larger, systemic network, a culture of exploitation and control that had been concealed for decades. This wasn't about isolated incidents. It was about a network, a machine designed to protect the powerful at any cost. The discovery didn't stop there. A decayed storage device was found in the rubble, and when the FBI's special digital team restored the audio file, what they heard left them speechless. The recording was less than 2 minutes long, but it was enough to send a chill down their spines. A male voice, hoarse with fear, whispered repeatedly, "I don't want to go back. I told them, I don't want to go back. Diddy made me. The voice was cut off abruptly, followed by a muffled pop, like the recorder being switched off. Most chilling of all, the FBI discovered a phrase carved into the brick wall of the basement: "Tell my mother I tried." The words etched so deeply into the mortar were a haunting testament to the desperate struggle of those who had been silenced by this horrific system. This was no longer just a criminal case. This was a culture of silence and corruption, one that had enabled Diddy and those around him to operate with impunity. The question now wasn't just about the victims, it was about the people who had chosen to stay silent, to look the other way. And as the investigation unraveled, the FBI knew they were dealing with something far larger than a single man's crimes. They were up against a system that had been carefully constructed, hidden behind layers of money, power, and influence. The walls were beginning to crumble, and with every revelation, the truth seemed harder to ignore. The public was finally beginning to see what had been buried for too long.
The final revelation and call to action. As the investigation into Diddy's empire reached its breaking point, public outrage grew to a pitch fever. The discovery of the bodies, the buried secrets, and the twisted network of power began to take on a life of its own. Social media exploded with demands for justice, with calls to hold Diddy and everyone involved accountable for the darkness that had been hidden for so long. But it wasn't just the public that was clamoring for answers. Investigators were beginning to piece together the true scope of the operation, and what they uncovered was beyond anything anyone had imagined. The FBI's focus turned to the intricate network of individuals who had allowed this web of secrecy to persist for years. The system of silence that had protected Diddy now appeared to extend far beyond his inner circle. From powerful media figures to influential politicians, the web of connections was sprawling, and the FBI was determined to follow every lead. Perhaps most shocking was the revelation that several high-profile names that had once been untouchable, were now implicated in the scandal. A leaked internal document revealed that at least 12 prominent figures were listed under payment codes alongside the note, "Security handling if urgent contact directly via burner line." These were not just random individuals, they were part of the machinery that had kept Diddy's empire running, shielding him from the consequences of his actions. As the investigation widened, it became clear that this wasn't just about a few bad apples. This was a system, a structure of corruption and complicity that had been carefully crafted over decades. Celebrities, executives, and even former law enforcement officers were all part of a network that had long been allowed to operate without scrutiny. The culture of silence had protected them all, but now it was beginning to crack. The public was finally demanding transparency. Whistleblowers, survivors, and those who had stayed silent for years were now stepping forward, their voices rising above the noise of the media storm. Justice, it seemed, was no longer just a possibility. It was an inevitability. But the question still lingered. How deep did this system of corruption go? And how many more people would have to speak out before the truth was fully exposed? As the investigation continued to unfold, the public's role in this story became undeniable. It wasn't just about holding Diddy accountable anymore. It was about making sure this dark chapter in entertainment history was never forgotten. The truth had been buried for too long, but it was finally being brought to light. And now, it was up to all of us to make sure it stayed exposed. Share the story. Speak out. Prove you're listening, because justice may be closer than we think.